The arranged marriage certificate felt like a death sentence in Beatrice Vaughn's trembling hands as she stood on the dusty platform of Paradise, Montana, watching the stranger who was now her husband load her trunk onto his wagon without so much as a glance in her direction. She had signed those papers 3 days ago in Boston, her father's debts hanging over both their heads like a thundercloud. And now here she was at 22 years old, married to a man whose face she had only seen in a single faded photograph that did nothing to capture the reality of his imposing presence. Preston James moved with the efficient grace of someone who had spent his entire life working hard, his broad shoulders straining against his worn cotton shirt as he secured her belongings. When he finally turned to face her, his hazel eyes met hers for only a moment before he gestured toward the wagon seat. "Best get going before the sun gets too high," he said, his voice deeper than she had imagined, carrying the rough edge of someone unaccustomed to lengthy conversation. Beatrice gathered her traveling skirts and accepted his offered hand to climb up, startled by the warmth of his calloused palm against her gloved fingers. The touch was brief, almost impersonal, yet it sent an unexpected flutter through her stomach that she immediately dismissed as nerves. This marriage was a business arrangement, nothing more. Her father had been clear about that. Preston needed a wife to help run his ranch and maintain his home. She needed to escape the shame of her family's financial ruin. Love had no place in such practical matters. The ride to his ranch took nearly 2 hours, and during that time, Preston spoke perhaps 20 words total, most of them pointing out landmarks or warning her about a rough patch in the road. Beatrice sat rigidly beside him, her hands folded in her lap, watching the vast Montana landscape roll past with its endless sky and rolling hills covered in late summer grass. She had never seen so much open space in her life. Boston had been all narrow streets and tall buildings, the air thick with coal smoke and the press of humanity. Here, the air was so clear it almost hurt to breathe, and the silence between them felt heavy enough to touch. "The ranch is just over that ridge," Preston finally said as they crested a hill. Below them spread a valley with a winding creek cutting through its center, and nestled against a stand of cottonwood trees sat a 2-story wooden house with a barn and several outbuildings. Cattle dotted the hillsides, and Beatrice could see the tiny figures of men working near one of the corrals. "It is larger than I expected," she admitted, her voice sounding strange after so much silence. Preston's jaw tightened slightly. "It is a working ranch. I have 3 hands who help with the cattle and horses. They have their own bunkhouse, so they would not bother you. The house is yours to manage as you see fit." The formality in his tone made her heart sink. This was exactly what she had feared. A cold arrangement between 2 strangers, sharing a home but never truly sharing a life. Her mother had warned her before she died that sometimes women must sacrifice their dreams of romance for the sake of survival. But Beatrice had always harbored a secret hope that perhaps, somehow, her story might be different. When they reached the house, Preston helped her down from the wagon, his hands spanning her waist for just a moment as he lifted her. The brief contact sent another unexpected jolt through her, and she found herself looking up into his face, really studying it for the first time. He was handsome in a rugged way, with strong features weathered by sun and wind, a straight nose that looked like it might have been broken once, and lips pressed into a firm line that suggested he rarely smiled. A thin scar cut through his left eyebrow, giving him a slightly dangerous appearance that both frightened and intrigued her. "I will show you inside," he said, already turning away from her to grab her trunk. The interior of the house surprised her. She had expected a bachelor's sparse furnishings and general neglect, but while the furniture was simple and practical, Everything was clean and well maintained. The main room held a large stone fireplace, a sturdy dining table with 6 chairs, and comfortable-looking furniture arranged near the windows. The kitchen was spacious with a modern cast-iron stove, and through an open doorway she could see what appeared to be a parlor. "Your room is upstairs," Preston said, carrying her trunk toward the staircase. "The second door on the right." Beatrice followed him up, her hand trailing along the smooth wooden banister. Upstairs, he pushed open a door to reveal a bedroom that was larger than her entire room back in Boston had been. A large bed with a simple quilt dominated the space, and there was a wardrobe, a dresser with a mirror, and even a small writing desk positioned near the window that overlooked the valley. Preston set her trunk down and moved toward the door. "My room is across the hall. There is a washroom at the end. Supper is usually around 6. I will leave you to settle in." "Wait," Beatrice said, her voice sharper than she intended. He paused in the doorway, his back to her. "Are we not going to discuss the expectations of this marriage?" He turned slowly, and something flickered in his eyes that she could not quite read. "You are free to manage the household as you wish. I rise before dawn most days and am often out with the cattle until evening. I expect meals to be prepared and the house kept clean, though Mrs. Chen from town comes twice a week to help with the heavier work. Beyond that, you may occupy yourself however you like. And the other aspects of marriage." The words came out barely above a whisper, heat flooding her cheeks. Preston's expression remained carefully neutral. "I would not force my attentions on any woman, arranged marriage or not. You have your room, I have mine. That is all you need to know." He left before she could respond, his boots heavy on the stairs. Beatrice sank onto the edge of the bed, unsure whether to feel relieved or insulted. She had prepared herself for the possibility that he might demand his marital rights immediately, had steeled herself to endure whatever he required. But this cold distance felt almost worse, a confirmation that she meant nothing to him beyond a housekeeper he had paid for with the funds he had sent to clear her father's debts. She rose and moved to the window, watching as Preston emerged from the house below and strode toward the barn with that purposeful gait of his. A moment later, he rode out on a magnificent chestnut horse, heading toward where his ranch hands were working. Beatrice pressed her forehead against the cool glass and fought back the tears that threatened to fall. This was her life now, married to a stranger in a strange land, with nothing but empty years stretching ahead of her. The first week passed in a blur of learning her way around the house and the ranch. Preston kept to his word about leaving her alone. He rose before she did each morning, and though she hurried to prepare breakfast, she often found him already gone, a coffee cup rinsed and left to dry by the sink, the only evidence he had been there. He came in for dinner each evening, ate quickly while answering her attempts at conversation with brief, polite responses, and then disappeared either back outside or into his room. The only time she saw any crack in his stoic demeanor was when she burned the roast on the third night, the meat coming out tough and nearly inedible. She had been close to tears, exhausted from trying to manage the large stove, but Preston had simply cut off a piece, chewed it thoughtfully, and said, "The stove runs hot. Try banking the fire more next time." Not a criticism, just a simple observation, and he had eaten every bite on his plate without complaint. On the 8th day, Beatrice woke to the sound of shouting from outside. She rushed to the window to see Preston in the corral with what appeared to be a wild horse, the animal rearing and bucking while Preston held firm to the lead rope, his voice low and steady as he spoke words she could not hear from this distance. She watched, her heart in her throat as he worked with the terrified creature for over an hour, never once losing his patience, never once raising his voice in anger. When the horse finally calmed enough to accept Preston's touch on its neck, Beatrice found herself smiling, her hands pressed against the window glass. There was something beautiful in the way he moved, the gentle confidence in his touch, the endless patience he showed the frightened animal. She wondered what it would be like to have that focus directed at her, those careful hands touching her with such deliberate tenderness. The thought shocked her with its intensity, and she stepped back from the window, her face burning. She had no right to such thoughts. He had made it clear what kind of marriage this would be. That afternoon, she decided to explore more of the ranch. She had stayed close to the house all week, uncertain of where she was allowed to go, but the beautiful weather and her own restlessness finally drove her outside. She walked down to the creek, lifting her skirts to keep them from dragging in the grass, and found a spot where the water pooled clear and deep beneath the cottonwoods. She was so lost in thought, watching the water ripple over the stones, that she did not hear Preston approach until his shadow fell across her. "It is a good spot," he said quietly, making her jump. "I come here sometimes when I need to think." Beatrice looked up at him, shading her eyes against the sun behind him. "I hope I am not intruding. It is your home now, too." He hesitated, then lowered himself to sit on a large rock nearby, maintaining a careful distance between them. "You have been doing well with the house." The compliment, small as it was, warmed her more than it should have. "Thank you. I am still learning the stove. You will get the feel for it." He picked up a smooth stone and turned it over in his hands, his fingers tracing its surface. "It was my mother's. She had it shipped all the way from Chicago. Said she refused to cook on an open hearth like a pioneer woman when there were modern conveniences available." It was the first personal thing he had shared with her. Beatrice shifted to face him more fully. "Is she no longer living?" "She passed 6 years ago. Fever took her in the winter." His voice remained even, but she saw his fingers tighten on the stone. "My father followed her 2 years later. Some people said it was his heart, but I think he just did not want to go on without her." They must have loved each other very much. Preston looked at her then, really looked at her, and something in his eyes made her breath catch. They did. Met when he hired her to teach at the school in town. She was from Philadelphia, educated and refined, and he was a rough rancher who could barely write his own name. Everyone said it would never work. His lips quirked in something that was almost a smile. They were wrong. The implication hung in the air between them, and Beatrice felt her heart begin to beat faster. Before she could respond, Preston stood abruptly, tossing the stone into the creek. "I should get back to work. Watch out for snakes down here by the water." He left her there, but something had shifted. The wall between them had developed a crack. 2 days later, Beatrice woke to the sound of rain hammering against the roof. She dressed quickly and went downstairs to find Preston in the kitchen, dripping wet and holding his left arm awkwardly against his side. "You are hurt," she said, rushing forward. "It is nothing. Horse shied at lightning and threw me into a fence post." But his face was pale beneath his tan, and when he tried to lift his arm, he winced. "Sit down," she ordered, surprising them both with her firm tone. When he hesitated, she added more gently, "Please." He lowered himself into a chair, and she carefully helped him out of his wet shirt, her fingers trembling slightly as they brushed against his bare skin. His torso was all lean muscle and scattered scars, telling stories of a hard life. A large bruise was already forming along his ribs, dark purple spreading across his side. "You need to see a doctor," she said. "Cannot get to town in this rain. The creek will be too high to cross." He met her eyes. "Do you know anything about treating injuries?" "My mother was often ill. I learned basic nursing care." She tried to sound more confident than she felt. "I need to make sure nothing is broken." She pressed carefully along his ribs, watching his face for signs of pain. He bore her examination stoically, though she saw his jaw clench when she reached a particularly tender spot. His skin was warm beneath her fingers, and she found herself acutely aware of his nearness, the masculine scent of him mixed with rain and leather. "I do not think anything is broken," she finally said, stepping back. "But you need to rest. Those ribs are badly bruised. I have cattle to move and fences to check. You have ranch hands for that. You are no good to anyone if you make this worse." When he started to argue, she placed her hands on her hips. "I may just be your housekeeper wife, but I will not stand by and watch you injure yourself further out of stubbornness." Something flickered in his eyes, an emotion she could not quite name. "You are not just a housekeeper. Am I not? You have made it very clear what I am and am not to you." The words came out more bitter than she intended, and she immediately regretted them. But Preston did not look angry. Instead, he reached out and gently caught her wrist, his thumb resting against her pulse point. "That is not what I meant to do," he said quietly. "I thought I was giving you space, not making you feel unwanted." Her heart was racing so fast she was certain he could feel it. "I do not understand. This marriage was not your choice. I know you only agreed because of your father's debts. I did not want you to feel trapped with a man who would demand more than you were willing to give." His eyes searched her face. "But if I have made you feel like you do not matter, then I have done this all wrong." Beatrice swallowed hard. "Why did you agree to this arrangement? You could have found a wife through more conventional means." Preston released her wrist, but continued to hold her gaze. "I tried. 3 times over the past 4 years I courted women from town. Each time, once they saw what life on a ranch really entailed, they changed their minds. I needed someone who understood from the beginning that this would be a hard life, with early mornings and late nights, with me gone for days, sometimes during cattle drives. I thought an arrangement would be more honest than false promises. But you want more than an arrangement." It was not a question. He stood slowly, favoring his injured side. "I want whatever you are willing to give. No more, no less. If all you ever want is separate rooms and polite conversation, then that is what we will have. But if you want more—" He stopped, his hand reaching up as if to touch her face, then falling back to his side. "Then I would very much like to give you more." The rain continued to pound outside, but inside the kitchen the air felt charged with possibility. Beatrice took a step toward him, then another, until she was close enough to feel the heat radiating from his body. "I was afraid," she whispered. "My father's debts forced me into this marriage, and I convinced myself that Loveless was safer than risking hope. And now—" She reached up and gently touched the scar on his eyebrow, feeling him go very still beneath her fingers. "Now, I think I might have been wrong about a great many things." Preston caught her hand against his face, turning his head to press a kiss to her palm that sent shivers racing down her spine. "I have wanted to touch you since the moment you stepped off that train," he admitted roughly. "But I was terrified of frightening you away. I am not so easily frightened." He smiled then, a real smile that transformed his entire face, making him look years younger. "No, I am beginning to see that you are not." When he kissed her, it was gentle and questioning, his lips soft against hers. Beatrice melted into him, her hands coming up to rest against his chest, feeling his heart pounding as wildly as her own. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Preston rested his forehead against hers. "I should probably go rest those ribs like you ordered," he said with a hint of humor in his voice. "You should, and I should make you something to eat." She pulled back slightly, suddenly shy. "But Preston, tonight we could perhaps sit together in the parlor, talk more." "I would like that very much." The rain continued for 3 days, trapping them in the house together. Preston tried to work the first day, but Beatrice caught him wincing and ordered him to rest, threatening to tie him to a chair if necessary. To her surprise, he obeyed, settling on the sofa in the parlor with a book while she worked on mending some of his shirts. "You do not have to do that," he said, watching her careful stitches. "I want to." She bit off the thread and held up the shirt, examining her work. "Besides, if you are going to insist on getting thrown into fence posts, someone needs to keep your clothes from falling apart." He laughed, an actual full laugh that made her grin. They fell into an easy conversation about the ranch, and he told her stories about growing up in Montana, about learning to ride before he could properly walk, about his mother's determination to bring culture and education to the rough territory. She shared her own memories of Boston, of afternoons in the library, of the theater performances she had loved, carefully editing out the slow decline as her father's gambling debts mounted. That evening, Preston taught her to play poker with matchsticks as currency. She proved surprisingly good at it, winning 3 hands in a row until he accused her of card counting. "I never said I had not watched my father play," she said innocently, raking in her pile of matchsticks. "You hustled me in my own home. I do not know whether to be impressed or offended." "Be impressed. It is more flattering." She grinned at him across the table, feeling more relaxed and happy than she had in months. On the second day of rain, Preston found her in the kitchen struggling to reach a pot on the highest shelf. He came up behind her, his chest against her back as he easily lifted it down for her. The casual touch, the warmth of him surrounding her, made her knees weak. When she turned, she found herself trapped between the counter and his body, his hands braced on either side of her. "Thank you," she managed, her voice coming out breathless. "Beatrice." The way he said her name, low and rough, made heat pool in her belly. "Tell me if I am moving too fast." Instead of answering, she reached up and pulled his head down to hers, kissing him with all the longing that had been building inside her. He responded immediately, one hand sliding into her hair while the other wrapped around her waist, pulling her flush against him. The kiss deepened, becoming urgent and hungry, and Beatrice felt herself getting lost in the sensation of his mouth on hers, his hands on her body. When they finally broke apart, both panting, Preston's eyes were dark with desire. "We should slow down." "Why?" She felt bold, reckless in a way she never had before. "Because when I take you to bed, I want it to be because you are certain, not because you got caught up in the moment." He pressed a softer kiss to her forehead. "I can wait." His restraint, his constant consideration of her feelings made her fall a little bit more. "You are not what I expected." "What did you expect?" "Someone harsh, demanding, cold." She traced the line of his jaw with her finger. "But you are gentle, Preston, even when you are trying to be stern." "Only with you." He caught her hand and kissed her fingers. "The cattle would laugh if they heard you say that." On the third evening, as the rain finally began to ease, they sat together on the sofa. Beatrice tucked against Preston's good side while he read aloud from a collection of poetry his mother had loved. His voice was soothing, and she found herself more focused on the rumble of it in his chest than the actual words. When he finished a particularly romantic sonnet, she looked up to find him watching her with an expression that made her breath catch. "What are you thinking?" she asked softly. "That I am the luckiest man in Montana. Even though you have bruised ribs and have been trapped inside for 3 days, especially because of that." He set the book aside and turned to face her more fully. "These 3 days with you have been better than months of lonely evenings. You make this house feel like a home, Beatrice. Not because you cook and clean, but because when you are in a room, it feels warmer somehow. Brighter." Tears pricked her eyes at the simple sincerity in his words. I was so afraid I would spend my whole life trapped in a loveless marriage. And now I think I might be falling in love with my husband." The smile that spread across his face was like sunrise. He cupped her face in his hands and kissed her slowly, thoroughly, until she was dizzy with want. "I fell in love with you the moment you stood up to me about resting my ribs," he murmured against her lips. "Maybe before that. Maybe the moment you climbed onto that wagon in paradise with your chin up and your shoulders back, determined to face whatever came. Preston." His name was a sigh and a prayer. "Stay with me tonight," he said. "Not out of obligation, not because you think you should, but because you want to." "I want to," she whispered. "I want you." He stood and held out his hand to her. She placed hers in it without hesitation, letting him lead her up the stairs to his room. The space was simpler than hers, dominated by a large bed with plain linens, but she barely noticed the details. All her attention was focused on Preston as he turned to face her, his eyes asking one more time if she was sure. In answer, she reached up and began unbuttoning his shirt, her fingers only trembling slightly. He stood perfectly still, letting her set the pace, until she pushed the fabric off his shoulders. She traced the bruise on his ribs with gentle fingers, then leaned in to press a kiss to the darkened skin. Preston's sharp intake of breath emboldened her. She continued her exploration, learning the landscape of his body with her hands and lips, feeling the tension coiling in his muscles as he held himself in check. When she finally looked up at him, his control was hanging by a thread. "My turn," he said roughly. And then it was her being undressed with careful, reverent hands, each newly revealed inch of skin greeted with kisses that made her gasp and arch against him. By the time he laid her down on his bed, she was trembling with need, all nervousness burned away by the fire he had ignited in her. He made love to her with the same patience he had shown that wild horse, the same gentleness he displayed with everything that mattered to him. There was pain at first, but he was so careful, so attentive to her reactions, that it faded quickly into something else entirely, a building pleasure that crashed over her in waves that left her crying out his name. After, as they lay tangled together, skin against skin, Preston pressed kisses to her hair and murmured words of love that made her heart feel too large for her chest. She fell asleep in his arms, finally understanding what her father-in-law must have felt, that deep certainty that life without this person would only be half living. The following weeks passed in a golden haze of happiness. Preston still rose early and worked long days, but now Beatrice rose with him, making coffee while he prepared for the day. They would steal a few minutes together before he left, kisses that grew heated until he reluctantly pulled away with a promise to hurry home. She threw herself into running the household, determined to prove she was more than just an ornamental wife. She learned to bake bread that he declared better than anything in town, figured out the temperamental stove, and even started helping with the ranch accounts in the evenings. Mrs. Chen, the woman who came to help with washing and heavy cleaning, took Beatrice under her wing with brisk efficiency. She was a Chinese immigrant who had come to Montana during the mining boom and stayed after marrying a rancher who had since passed. She ran a boarding house in Paradise now and supplemented her income by helping the surrounding ranches. "You are good for him," Mrs. Chen announced one afternoon as they hung sheets on the line. "Mr. Preston was always too serious before. Now he smiles." Beatrice felt herself flush with pleasure. "He makes me smile too." "That is how it should be. Marriage is partnership, not prison." Mrs. Chen pinned up another sheet with practiced efficiency. "You come to town with me next week. The ladies have their quilting circle. They are curious about the new Mrs. James." The prospect both excited and terrified Beatrice. She had been so cocooned in her happiness with Preston that she had not given much thought to the wider community. Will they accept me? They are good women, mostly. A few gossips, but what town does not have those? Mrs. Chen patted her arm. You have nothing to fear. You are a respectable married woman with good husband. That is all that matters here. When Beatrice mentioned the quilting circle to Preston that evening, he looked up from the accounts they had been working on. Do you want to go? I think so. It would be good to meet other women, make friends perhaps. Then you should go. Take the wagon. He reached across the table and took her hand. I do not want you to feel isolated out here. My mother always said she would have gone mad without her friends in town. Would you mind if I invited some of the women here sometime? Perhaps for tea. The smile he gave her made her heart flutter. Beatrice, this is your home. You do not need my permission to invite guests. Invite the whole town if you want. She laughed and moved to sit on his lap, the accounts forgotten. I do not want the whole town, but a few friends would be nice. He nuzzled her neck, his hand spanning her waist. Whatever makes you happy. You make me happy, she said seriously, framing his face with her hands. I never imagined I could feel this way. Neither did I. He kissed her softly. I thought I was resigned to a comfortable but distant partnership. Instead, I got you. The trip to Paradise the following week proved enlightening. The town was small but thriving, with a main street that boasted a general store, a bank, a hotel, a saloon, a church, and various other businesses. Mrs. Chen drove the wagon with Beatrice beside her, pointing out notable locations and filling her in on the local personalities. The quilting circle met in the church basement, and Beatrice was greeted with warm curiosity by a group of about 15 women ranging from young mothers to grandmothers. They welcomed her with genuine kindness, showing her the quilt they were working on for a family whose home had burned down the previous month. It is our way of helping each other, explained a woman named Margaret Foster, who was close to Beatrice's age. We take turns choosing a project. Sometimes it is quilts for those in need, sometimes for new babies, sometimes just for ourselves. Beatrice felt herself relaxing as the afternoon progressed. The women were friendly without being intrusive, sharing local news and gentle gossip. Several asked about Preston with obvious fondness. He helped my husband repair our barn after last winter's storm, one woman said. Would not accept any payment, said neighbors help neighbors. He bought my son's first calf for twice what it was worth, another added. Gave the boy confidence to start his own herd. The stories painted a picture of Preston as a respected member of the community, generous with his time and resources. Beatrice felt a swell of pride that this good man was her husband. Margaret walked with her back to the wagon afterward. I am glad you came. Preston has been alone too long. Everyone worried about him after his father passed. He has been very kind to me, Beatrice said carefully. Kind, Margaret laughed. My dear, the way that man looks at you when he thinks no one is watching, kind does not begin to cover it. You are good for each other. Anyone can see that. On the ride home, Beatrice asked Mrs. Chen, did people know this was an arranged marriage? Some guessed. But arranged or not, what you have now is real. That is what matters. She glanced at Beatrice shrewdly. You love him, very much. And he loves you. So the beginning does not matter, only the middle and the end. That night, Beatrice told Preston about her day, about the women she had met and the stories they had shared about him. He looked embarrassed by the praise but pleased that she had enjoyed herself. Margaret Foster invited us to dinner next Sunday, she said, watching his reaction carefully. He was quiet for a moment. I have not socialized much since my father died, got out of the habit. We do not have to go if you do not want to. No, I want to. He pulled her into his arms. I want to show off my beautiful wife. Let everyone see how lucky I am. The dinner at the Foster home went well, and it led to more invitations. Soon they had a social life, attending church on Sundays followed by meals with various families, hosting their own gatherings at the ranch. Beatrice discovered she loved entertaining, loved filling their home with laughter and conversation. Preston, though naturally reserved, relaxed among friends, and she loved seeing this more social side of him. Autumn arrived in a blaze of gold and red, the aspens on the hillsides turning brilliant against the deep green of the pines. Preston took Beatrice riding through the ranch, teaching her to sit a horse properly, laughing when she shrieked the first time her mare broke into a canter. They picnicked by the creek where they had first really talked, and he made love to her on a blanket under the cottonwoods, the leaves falling around them like gold coins. "I want to show you the high pasture before the snow comes," he said one morning in late September. "It is a full day's ride, so we would need to camp overnight. Are you up for it?" The idea of sleeping under the stars with him thrilled her. Absolutely. They set out early on a crisp morning, the air sharp and clean. Preston led them through forests and meadows, always pointing out landmarks and wildlife, teaching her to read the land. They startled a herd of elk at midday and stopped to watch the majestic animals thunder across a ridge. The high pasture, when they reached it in late afternoon, took Beatrice's breath away. It was a vast expanse of grass ringed by mountains, with a small lake reflecting the sky like polished silver. Preston's cattle grazed peacefully, watched over by one of his hands, a young man named Tom who greeted them warmly. "All quiet, boss," Tom reported. "That troublesome bull finally settled down. He has been grazing peaceful for 3 days now." "Good. We will camp here tonight and head back tomorrow." Preston began unloading their gear. "You need anything from town?" "No, sir, got everything I need." "Madam." Tom tipped his hat to Beatrice. "It is good to finally meet you. The boss talks about you all the time." Beatrice glanced at Preston, who had the grace to look embarrassed. "Does he now?" Tom, oblivious to his employer's discomfort, grinned. "Says you are the best thing that ever happened to him. We are all real happy for you both." After Tom returned to his camp on the other side of the pasture, Beatrice helped Preston set up their tent. It was a simple affair, just enough shelter in case of rain, with their bedrolls laid out inside. Preston built a fire and cooked dinner while Beatrice sat on a log, watching the sun paint the mountains in shades of pink and orange. "This is beautiful," she said softly. "This was my father's favorite place on the ranch. He used to bring my mother up here every year before the first snow. Said it reminded him what he was working for, what he wanted to preserve for future generations." Preston settled beside her, handing her a plate of beans and bacon. "I want to bring our children here someday. Show them the same thing." It was the first time either of them had mentioned children, and Beatrice felt her heart skip. "You want children?" "I do." He looked at her intently. "Do you?" "Yes." She had not been certain before, but looking at him in the firelight, imagining a child with his eyes and her smile, she knew it was true. "I want to have your children." He set their plates aside and kissed her deeply, and their dinner grew cold as they lost themselves in each other. Later, lying in the tent with the flap open to see the stars, Beatrice traced patterns on his chest and asked, "How many children do you want?" "As many as we are blessed with. 2, 3, a dozen. Whatever comes." He caught her hand and kissed it. "What about you?" "I always imagined 2 or 3. A house full of noise and laughter." She paused. "I want them to grow up knowing they are loved, that they are wanted. They will be." He pulled her closer. "Any child of yours would be cherished beyond measure." They made love slowly under the stars, and Beatrice thought she had never felt more complete, more certain that she was exactly where she was meant to be. Winter arrived early that year, a heavy snow in late October that trapped them inside for days. But the isolation did not feel confining. They spent the long evenings reading by the fire, playing cards, making love while the wind howled outside. Preston taught Beatrice to shoot so she would be able to protect herself if necessary, and she proved to have a natural eye for it, hitting the targets he set up with increasing accuracy. "Where did you learn to shoot like that?" he asked, impressed, as she hit the center of a bottle 3 times in a row. "I am just aiming where you tell me to aim." "You are a natural. Remind me never to make you truly angry." She laughed and turned to him, the rifle held safely pointed down. Snow was falling softly around them, catching in his hair and on his eyelashes. "I could never be angry enough to shoot you. Good to know." He pulled her close, mindless of the cold. "I love you, Beatrice James." "I love you too, Preston James." By Christmas, Beatrice was almost certain she was pregnant, though she did not say anything yet, wanting to be completely sure. They celebrated the holiday quietly at home, exchanging gifts by the tree Preston had cut and dragged in from the forest. He gave her a beautiful cameo necklace that had belonged to his mother, and she gave him a watch engraved with their initials and wedding date. "It is perfect," he said, his voice thick with emotion as he turned the watch over in his hands. "I wanted you to have something to carry with you," she said softly. "So even when you are out on the range, you have a reminder of home." He made love to her under the Christmas tree, the firelight painting their skin gold, and Beatrice felt so full of joy she thought her heart might burst from it. In January, when she was certain about the baby, she waited until after dinner to tell him. He had been working on a broken bridle at the kitchen table, and she stood behind him, nervous despite knowing he would be happy. "Preston, I have something to tell you." He set down the leather and turned to face her. "What is it? You look nervous." "I am not nervous exactly, just." She took a breath. "I am going to have a baby." For a moment he just stared at her, and then he was on his feet, lifting her into his arms and spinning her around. "A baby, truly, truly. The doctor in Paradise confirmed it this morning when Mrs. Chen took me to town." He set her down carefully as if she might break, his hands framing her face. "When? July, he thinks. Maybe early August, July." He kissed her forehead, her cheeks, her lips. "We are going to be parents. Are you happy?" "Happy," he laughed, the sound joyous. "Beatrice, I am beyond happy. I am overwhelmed. I am terrified. I am excited." He placed his hand gently on her still flat stomach. "We made this, you and I together." That night he held her so tenderly, as if she had become infinitely precious and fragile. She finally had to laugh and tell him she was not made of glass. "I know, but you are carrying our child. I will never stop marveling at that." The pregnancy progressed smoothly through the long winter and into spring. Preston became almost comically protective, trying to prevent her from doing any heavy work, until she threatened to hit him with a frying pan if he did not stop hovering. "The doctor said I am healthy, and the baby is thriving." "I am pregnant, not helpless," she told him firmly after he tried to prevent her from carrying a basket of laundry. "I just want to make sure you are both safe." "We are safe, but I will go mad if you do not let me do anything." She softened her tone and took his hand. "I know you are worried, but you have to trust that I know my own body and limits." He nodded reluctantly. "I am sorry, I do not mean to smother you. I know. And I love that you care so much. Just dial it back about 20%, he laughed and kissed her. 20%, I can do that." The women from the quilting circle threw her a baby party in May, presenting her with a beautiful handmade quilt and various other necessities. Margaret Foster, who had become a close friend, had organized everything, and Beatrice found herself moved to tears by the kindness of these women who had welcomed her so completely into their community. "You are one of us now," Margaret said, hugging her. Your baby will grow up surrounded by people who care. In June, Preston finished converting the room next to theirs into a nursery. He built a cradle with his own hands, the wood sanded so smooth there was no possibility of splinters, and Beatrice painted it white with tiny yellow flowers. They stood together in the doorway, his arms around her expanded middle, and looked at the space they had created for their child. It is perfect, Beatrice said, just like you. He kissed the side of her neck. I still cannot believe this is my life. That you are my wife, that we are about to become parents. Do you ever regret the arranged marriage? Never. Not for one moment. He turned her to face him. That arrangement gave me you. It gave me everything. Labor started on a hot July afternoon while Preston was out checking fences. Beatrice sent one of the hands to fetch him and Mrs. Chen, who had agreed to assist with the birth along with the doctor. The pains were manageable at first, but as the hours passed and the sun began to set, they intensified until Beatrice had to grip the bedpost and breathe through them. Preston arrived in a panic, taking the stairs 2 at a time to burst into their bedroom where Mrs. Chen was calmly preparing supplies. Is she all right? She is fine. This is normal. Mrs. Chen gave him a stern look. You need to calm down or I will send you out. I am not leaving her. Then be useful. Hold her hand and keep quiet. The doctor arrived shortly after, a kindly older man who examined Beatrice and declared everything was progressing normally. First babies take their time, he said. It will likely be several more hours. It was actually nearly dawn before their son finally arrived, red-faced and howling his displeasure at entering the world. Preston had stayed by Beatrice's side through all of it, letting her squeeze his hand hard enough to leave bruises, wiping her face with cool cloths, murmuring encouragements even when she told him this was entirely his fault, and she was never doing this again. But the moment the doctor laid the baby in her arms, all the pain vanished. She looked down at the tiny, perfect face and felt love slam into her with the force of a stampede. He is beautiful, she whispered. Preston was crying openly, his finger carefully tracing their son's impossibly small hand. He is perfect. You are perfect. You did so well. We should name him after your father, Beatrice said. Thomas Preston James. Preston looked at her with such love it took her breath away. Are you sure? I am sure. He should have his grandfather's name. They called the baby Thomas, though it quickly became Tommy. He was a good baby, sleeping in reasonable stretches and nursing well. Preston was a devoted father, getting up with Beatrice in the night, walking the floor with the baby when he was fussy, changing diapers without complaint. I never imagined you as the type to be so hands-on with an infant, Beatrice said one evening, watching him rock their son to sleep. Why not? Most men leave it all to the wives. Most men are fools then. He looked down at the baby with such tenderness it made her chest ache. I would not miss this for anything. These early days, watching him grow and change, I want to remember all of it. As Tommy grew from infant to baby to toddler, the ranch prospered. Preston hired another hand to help with the increased workload, giving him more time at home. They fell into a rhythm of family life, their days filled with the ordinary and extraordinary moments of raising a child together. When Tommy was 2, Beatrice discovered she was pregnant again. This time she told Preston right away, unable to keep the secret even for a day. Another baby. He picked her up and spun her around carefully. Tommy is going to be a big brother. Their daughter, Mary Elizabeth James, arrived the following spring, an easier birth than Tommy's had been. She had Preston's hazel eyes and Beatrice's dark hair, and from the moment she was born, she had her father wrapped around her tiny finger. I am doomed, Preston said, cradling the newborn against his chest. How am I supposed to say no to a face like this? You are not, Beatrice said with a laugh. She is going to have you trained by the time she can walk. Life settled into a beautiful pattern. Tommy started helping Preston with small ranch tasks, following his father around with earnest determination. Mary grew into a spirited toddler who kept them all on their toes. The ranch continued to thrive, allowing them to expand and improve their home. Preston added a wraparound porch where they spent summer evenings watching the children play. He modernized the barn and built a new bunkhouse for the hands. Beatrice started a garden that became the envy of the county, growing vegetables and flowers that she preserved and shared with neighbors. Their social circle expanded as their children grew. Tommy became fast friends with the foster children, and there were frequent playdates and shared meals. The house that had once been so quiet and lonely was now constantly filled with noise and laughter, exactly as Beatrice had once imagined. On their 5th wedding anniversary, Preston took her back to the high pasture where they had camped that autumn before she got pregnant with Tommy. They left the children with Margaret Foster for the weekend, riding out just the two of them like old times. "This feels like playing hooky," Beatrice said as they climbed the familiar trail. "We deserve a break. Much as I love our children, it is nice to have you to myself for a couple of days." They made camp by the lake, and after dinner, Preston pulled out a small wrapped package. "Happy anniversary." Inside was a beautiful silver locket engraved with both children's initials. When she opened it, she found tiny photographs of Tommy and Mary inside. "Preston, this is beautiful. Where did you even get their photographs so small?" "I had them made specially in Helena. Took me 3 trips to get it right." He helped her fasten it around her neck. "I wanted you to be able to carry them with you always." "I love it." She touched the locket reverently, then pulled out her own gift, a new saddle blanket she had woven herself in his favorite colors. "It is not as fancy as a locket. It is perfect because you made it." He examined the intricate pattern. "You get better at this every year." They spread their bedroll under the stars, just as they had that first time, and made love with the ease and passion of two people who knew each other completely. Afterward, lying tangled together, Beatrice propped herself up on her elbow to look at him. "Do you ever think about how different our lives would be if we had not agreed to that arranged marriage?" Preston was quiet for a moment, his fingers playing with her hair. "I try not to. The thought of not having you, not having our family, it is too painful to contemplate. I was so afraid that day I arrived in paradise. I thought I was going to spend the rest of my life trapped and miserable. And instead," she leaned down to kiss him softly, "instead I found everything I did not know I was looking for. You gave me a home, a family, a purpose. You gave me love. You gave me the same things, more than the same things." He pulled her back down against him. "You took a lonely rancher and turned him into the luckiest man alive. We are both lucky. We took an arrangement and turned it into something real. It was always real," Preston said seriously. "From the moment I saw you on that platform, determined and brave despite being terrified, I knew you were going to change my life. I just had no idea how much." They stayed up late talking, sharing memories and dreams, planning the future they would build together. When they finally slept, it was with the profound contentment of two people who had found their way home. The years continued to pass in a blur of happiness. Tommy grew tall and serious, showing a natural aptitude for ranch work that made Preston proud. Mary was spirited and fearless, insisting on learning to ride and rope just like her brother. When she was 5, Beatrice gave birth to twins, another boy and girl they named James and Julia. 4 children, Preston said, looking down at the newborn twins with wonder. "We have 4 children." "Is it too many?" Beatrice asked, exhausted but happy. It is perfect. Our house is full, our life is full. What more could anyone want? As the children grew, Preston made sure to spend quality time with each of them individually. He taught Tommy advanced ranching skills and began involving him in major decisions about the operation. With Mary, he was patient with her tomboyish tendencies, never suggesting she should be more ladylike like some fathers might. He taught her to rope and shoot and ride with the same care he gave Tommy. Beatrice created traditions that held their family together. Sunday dinners where they all gathered, no matter what. Annual trips to the high pasture once the younger twins were old enough. Christmas celebrations that grew more elaborate each year. Summer picnics by the creek where she and Preston had first connected. On their 10th anniversary, they hosted a large party at the ranch. It seemed like half the county turned out to celebrate with them, the house and yard full of friends and neighbors who had become like extended family. Margaret Foster made a toast, her glass raised high. 10 years ago, Beatrice arrived in paradise as a stranger entering into an arrangement. Today, we celebrate a love story that has inspired us all. To Beatrice and Preston, proof that sometimes the best things in life come from taking a chance. Everyone cheered and drank, and Preston pulled Beatrice close, kissing her soundly despite their audience. "Here is to 10 more years," he said, "and 10 after that and 10 after that." "Forever," Beatrice agreed. "I want forever with you." That night, after the guests had left and the children were finally asleep, they stood on their porch watching the stars. Preston wrapped his arms around Beatrice from behind, his chin resting on her shoulder. "You remember what you said to me after that first week?" he asked. "When you burned the roast, you told me the stove ran hot and I should bank the fire more. You looked so upset. I wanted to comfort you, but I was afraid you would reject me." He tightened his arms around her. "I was half in love with you already and terrified you would never feel the same. I think I started falling for you that day too. The way you ate that terrible roast without complaint, trying to make me feel better." She turned in his arms to face him. "You were so patient with me, Preston. You let me come to you in my own time. It was the hardest thing I ever did, acting like I did not want you when I wanted you desperately from the start." He cupped her face tenderly. "But it was worth it. Everything has been worth it." "I thought marriage would be loveless," Beatrice said, echoing the fear she had carried to Montana all those years ago. "But every touch, every moment with you proved me wrong. You changed my mind about everything." "You changed my life," Preston replied simply. "You took my house and made it a home. You took my existence and made it a life worth living." They kissed under the stars, and it felt just as thrilling as the first time. That spark still burning bright after 10 years and 4 children and countless ordinary days that had somehow added up to an extraordinary life. The twins grew from babies to toddlers to children with distinct personalities. James was quiet and thoughtful, spending hours reading when he could get away with it. Julia was her mother's daughter, organizing everyone and managing the household with stern efficiency even at age 7. Tommy, now 15, had become Preston's right hand on the ranch, capable of handling most tasks independently. Mary, 13, had reluctantly accepted that she needed to learn some traditionally feminine skills, but still spent more time in the barn than the kitchen when given the choice. One evening at dinner, Tommy cleared his throat nervously. "Father, Mother, I have been thinking about my future." Preston and Beatrice exchanged glances. "What about it?" Preston asked. "I want to go to agricultural college. There is a new one in Bozeman that teaches modern ranching techniques. I think I could learn things that would help us improve the ranch." Beatrice felt pride swell in her chest. Her son was thinking about education and improvement, not just accepting the way things had always been done. Preston was quiet for a long moment. That would mean 2 years away from home. I know, but I would come back. This ranch, this land, it is my future. I just want to be better prepared to take it over someday. Take it over. Preston's voice was gruff with emotion. Not for a long time, Tommy said hastily. But eventually, yes, if you will have me. Preston stood and walked around the table, pulling his son into a hard embrace. Nothing would make me prouder than to pass this ranch to you someday, knowing it will be in good hands. After Tommy went to bed that night, Beatrice found Preston on the porch, staring out at the darkened land. Are you all right? He is almost grown. Our firstborn is talking about college and taking over the ranch, and I cannot figure out where the time went. He pulled her against him. It feels like yesterday you were telling me about the pregnancy. I know. But look at the man he is becoming. Strong and thoughtful and ambitious. We raised him well. You raised him well. I just tried not to mess it up too badly. We raised him together, Beatrice corrected. Just like we have done everything together. Preston kissed the top of her head. I could not have asked for a better partner in any of this. Not in ranching, not in parenting, not in life. The feeling is entirely mutual. Mary came to them a year later with her own announcement. She wanted to become a veterinarian, a profession that was slowly opening to women. I know it will be difficult, she said, her chin set stubbornly in a way that reminded Beatrice of herself. But I am good with animals, and Dr. Harrison said I have a natural talent. He would sponsor my application to veterinary school. This time, Preston did not hesitate. If that is your dream, we will support you however we can. Mary's face lit up with joy and relief. You mean it. You are not going to say it is not proper for a woman. When have I ever cared about what is proper? Preston asked with a slight smile. You are my daughter. If you want to be a veterinarian, then you will be the best veterinarian Montana has ever seen. She threw herself into his arms with a squeal that made the twins come running to see what the excitement was about. As their older children prepared to leave for their respective schools, Beatrice felt the bittersweet pang of watching them grow up. But she was also intensely proud of the independent, ambitious young people they had raised. We did good, she told Preston one night. We did. They are going to go out into the world and make their mark, and then hopefully come back and make this place even better. You hope they come back. This is their home. No matter where they go or what they do, I think they will always come back. He was quiet for a moment. The way I always knew you would come back to me, even before I knew you were mine. I was always yours, Beatrice said softly. From that first moment, even when I did not realize it yet. The years rolled on with their particular mixture of joy and sorrow. They celebrated graduations and homecomings. Tommy returned from college with new ideas that he and Preston spent hours discussing and implementing. Mary came home for summers between school terms, working with Dr. Harrison and gradually taking over more of his practice as he aged. The twins grew into teenagers with their own dreams and aspirations. James wanted to be a lawyer, drawn to justice and fairness in a way that made Beatrice think he would make a real difference in the world. Julia announced she wanted to run a hospital, having nursed various sick animals and people back to health throughout her childhood. We are raising a generation of professionals, Preston said with wonder when Julia shared her ambition. How did two simple ranchers end up with such ambitious children? By teaching them they could be anything they wanted, Beatrice replied. By showing them what love and partnership looks like, by giving them roots and wings. Their 20th anniversary arrived in a year of plenty. The ranch had expanded significantly under Preston and Tommy's joint management. Mary had opened her own practice in Paradise, becoming the first female veterinarian in the state. The twins were preparing for their own departures to college. Preston had secretly planned a surprise party, coordinating with all the children to make sure everyone could be home. When Beatrice walked into what she thought was a simple family dinner, she found the house packed with friends and family, people whose lives they had touched over the years. 20 years, Preston said in his speech, his hand tight around hers. 20 years ago, I married a stranger out of loneliness and practicality. I expected a housekeeper and companion at best. Instead, I got a partner, a lover, a best friend, and the mother of my children. I got the love of my life. Beatrice was crying openly by the time he finished, and when he kissed her, the whole room erupted in applause and cheers. Later, when it was just the two of them in their bedroom, Preston presented her with a new ring, a beautiful band of gold set with small diamonds that sparkled in the lamplight. I never gave you a proper engagement ring, he said. It did not seem necessary for an arranged marriage. But you deserve one. You deserve everything. Beatrice held out her hand, letting him slide the ring onto her finger above her simple wedding band. I do not need diamonds to know you love me, I know, but I wanted you to have them anyway. He brought her hand to his lips. I wanted a visible symbol of how much you mean to me. She pulled him down for a kiss that soon turned heated despite 20 years of marriage and 4 grown children. The passion between them had never faded, only deepened and matured like a fine wine. Make love to me, she whispered against his lips, like you did on our wedding night when you were so careful and gentle. I am always gentle with you, I know. That is why I love you. He undressed her slowly, reverently, as if she were the most precious thing in the world. And as he made love to her, Beatrice thought about the journey they had taken together. From strangers to lovers to partners to parents, always growing, always choosing each other over and over again. The next decade brought grandchildren, 4 from Tommy and 3 from Mary, with promises of more to come. The twins both married and started their own families, James with a fellow lawyer and Julia with a doctor she met while setting up her hospital. Preston and Beatrice became the family matriarch and patriarch, their home still the center where everyone gathered for holidays and celebrations. They scaled back their direct involvement in the ranch, letting Tommy and his oldest son take over the day-to-day operations, but Preston still rode out most mornings to check on things. I cannot quite let go, he admitted to Beatrice as they sat on the porch swing one evening, watching their grandchildren play in the yard. You do not have to let go completely. This ranch is part of you. She leaned against him, comfortable and content. But it is good to see Tommy running things. He has done well. He has. They all have. Preston wrapped his arm around her shoulders. We built something good here, not just the ranch, but the family, the legacy. We did it together. Everything good in my life, I did it with you. On their 30th anniversary, their children threw them a massive celebration. 3 generations gathered at the ranch, filling every room and spilling out into the yard. There was music and dancing and endless food, laughter ringing out across the valley that had been their home for so long. Tommy made a toast, his voice carrying across the crowd. 30 years ago, my parents entered into an arranged marriage. They did not know each other. They did not love each other. But they chose each day to build something together, and that daily choice created the foundation that all of us stand on now. They showed us what real love looks like. Not the easy, instant kind from fairy tales, but the kind that grows and deepens and becomes stronger with every challenge faced together. Beatrice clutched Preston's hand, overwhelmed with gratitude for the life they had built. When she looked up at him, she saw tears in his eyes too. Thank you, he said softly, just for her, for taking a chance on a lonely rancher, for building this life with me, for every day of the past 30 years. Thank you for being patient, for letting me come to you, for every gentle touch that showed me what love could be. They danced together that night, moving slowly to music played by some of their grandchildren who had formed a small band. Beatrice rested her head on Preston's chest, listening to his heartbeat, steady and strong after all these years. "I thought marriage would be loveless," she murmured. "I was so afraid. I know. I was afraid too. Afraid I would never find someone who could be happy here, who could love this life, who could love me. But we found each other. We did. And every touch, every moment, every day for 30 years has only made me more certain that you are the best thing that ever happened to me." As the years continued to pass, they grew older together with grace. Preston's hair went completely gray, then white, but his eyes still sparkled when he looked at her. Beatrice developed lines around her eyes and mouth, earned from decades of smiling, and her own dark hair was now streaked with silver. They spent their days in comfortable routine. Mornings on the porch with coffee, watching the sunrise over the land they loved. Afternoons with grandchildren who came to visit, Preston teaching them to ride while Beatrice baked cookies. Evenings in the parlor, reading or talking or simply sitting together in the easy silence of two people who had nothing left to prove. Sometimes they rode up to the high pasture, though the trip took longer now and they had to rest more frequently. They would sit by the lake, holding hands, remembering all the times they had been there together over the years. "You have any regrets?" Beatrice asked him during one of these trips when they were both in their late 60s. Preston was quiet for a long moment, his fingers interlaced with hers. "I regret that I wasted that first week being distant. I regret every moment I did not tell you I loved you. I regret that our time together is finite." He turned to look at her. "But I do not regret a single decision that brought us to this point. Not one. Neither do I. Even the hard times, even the struggles, they all led us here. To this moment with you by my side, having lived a life richer than I ever dreamed possible." He lifted her hand to his lips. "I love you, Beatrice James. I will love you until my last breath and beyond. And I love you, Preston James. You changed my entire world with your gentleness and patience. You showed me what love really means." They sat together as the sun set, painting the mountains in shades of pink and gold. Two people who had started as strangers and become one through years of choice and commitment and profound, enduring love. As they grew into their 70s, they slowed down more, but their love never diminished. Preston still brought Beatrice wildflowers from the meadow. She still made his favorite meals and darned his socks. They still held hands when they walked and kissed goodnight every evening without fail. Their great-grandchildren started arriving, extending the family line another generation. The ranch continued to thrive under Tommy's management, with his children learning the trade just as he had learned from Preston. On their 50th anniversary, the entire extended family gathered once more. There were nearly 60 people crowded onto the ranch, representing 3 generations descended from the arranged marriage that had seemed so cold and practical at the start. Preston stood with difficulty, leaning on a cane to make a toast. His voice was not as strong as it once was, but it carried the weight of decades of love. 50 years ago, I stood in paradise and watched the woman who would change my life step off a train. I had paid to settle her father's debts in exchange for a wife. It was a transaction, pure and simple. He looked at Beatrice, his eyes still full of love. But the moment she placed her hand in mine to climb onto that wagon, something shifted. And every day since, every touch, every word, every moment has been a gift beyond price. She thought marriage would be loveless. I changed her mind by showing her every day that she was cherished, that she was valued, that she was loved beyond measure. There was not a dry eye in the room. Beatrice stood and moved to his side, her own movements slower now but still graceful. "And he succeeded," she said, her voice clear despite her age. "This tender cowboy took my fear and turned it into trust. He took my resignation and turned it into hope. He took my heart, which I thought would remain locked away forever, and coaxed it open with patience and gentleness. Our marriage started as an arrangement, but it became the greatest love story I could have imagined." They kissed to thunderous applause, and the celebration went long into the night. As they prepared for bed that evening, moving with the careful slowness of age, Preston helped Beatrice with the clasp of her necklace, the locket he had given her 30 years ago, now worn smooth from constant wear. "I am tired," she admitted, settling into bed beside him. "I know, me too." He pulled her close, her body fitting perfectly against his as it had for 50 years. "But it has been a good life, has it not? The best life. Better than I ever dreamed possible." She traced his face with her fingers, memorizing features she knew as well as her own. "Thank you for being exactly who you were, for not trying to be anything other than a tender, patient, loving man. Thank you for taking a chance on that lonely rancher all those years ago, for turning my house into a home and my existence into a life." They fell asleep in each other's arms, as they had done thousands of times before, content and complete. The years that followed were quiet and gentle. They spent their days surrounded by family, watching their legacy grow and flourish. They took short walks around the ranch, stopping frequently to rest and remember. They sat on the porch swing and watched sunsets, hands clasped, needing no words to communicate what they felt. When Preston fell ill in his 78th year, Beatrice nursed him with the same care he had always shown her. She sat by his bedside, holding his hand, reading to him from the books they had shared over the decades. "I am not ready to leave you," he told her one afternoon, his voice weak. "Then do not, stay with me." But they both knew it was not that simple. "Everything I am, everything good about me, came from loving you," he said. "You made me better, you made me whole. And you saved me. You showed me what love could be when I had given up hope of ever finding it." His eyes closed, and for a moment she thought he had fallen asleep. Then he squeezed her hand gently. "Promise me you will be all right, that you will not spend whatever time you have left grieving." "I cannot promise that. Losing you will break my heart. But you will heal. You are stronger than you think." He opened his eyes to look at her. "Live, Beatrice, for both of us." He passed quietly 2 days later, surrounded by his children and grandchildren, with Beatrice holding his hand until his last breath. The grief was overwhelming, a physical pain that stole her breath and made her feel as if she were drowning. But true to her promise, she lived. She stayed at the ranch, surrounded by family, watching her great-grandchildren grow. She told them stories about their great-grandfather, about the man who had been so gentle and patient, who had turned an arranged marriage into a love story for the ages. On what would have been their 55th anniversary, she rode up to the high pasture one last time, helped by Tommy and Mary. They left her alone by the lake, watching the sunset paint the mountains in glorious color. "I am still here," she said to the sky, to Preston's memory. "Still loving you, still grateful for every moment we had together." She touched the locket at her throat, now holding photographs of Preston alongside their children. "You changed my mind about everything. You showed me that love could grow from the smallest beginning. That patience and gentleness could transform fear into trust, loneliness into belonging, a simple arrangement into something extraordinary." The wind rustled through the trees, and she smiled, imagining it was his answer. Beatrice lived for more years, healthy and active until the very end. When her time came, she went peacefully in her sleep, a smile on her face as if greeting an old friend. They buried her beside Preston, their headstones side by side overlooking the valley they had loved. At the funeral, Tommy spoke for all their children. Our parents showed us what love really means. Not grand gestures or passionate declarations, though they had those too, but daily choice. The decision every single day to choose each other, to work together, to build something lasting. They started as strangers brought together by circumstance, but they chose to become partners, then friends, then lovers. They chose to be a family. And that choice, made new each day for over 50 years, created the foundation that all of us stand on. The ranch stayed in the family, passed down through generations, each one adding their own story to the legacy Preston and Beatrice had begun. The house remained full of love and laughter, just as Beatrice had always wanted. And though the original tender cowboy and his arranged bride were gone, their love story lived on, told and retold, inspiring generations to believe that love could grow from the smallest beginning, nurtured with patience, gentleness, and daily choice. In Paradise, Montana, there stood a ranch that had been built on love, the kind that transforms fear into trust and strangers into soulmates. And though the land changed and the buildings were updated and the family grew beyond counting, at its heart remained the simple truth that Beatrice and Preston had proven with their lives. That sometimes the best things come from taking a chance, that arrangements can become romances, and that a tender touch, offered with patience and genuine care, can change not just a mind but an entire destiny. Their story became legend in Paradise, the tale of the bride who thought marriage would be loveless, and the cowboy who proved her wrong with every gentle touch, every patient word, every day of choosing her above all else. It was a story of transformation, of two people who had every reason to remain strangers becoming instead the deepest of partners, the truest of loves. And in the end, that was their greatest legacy. Not the prosperous ranch or the successful children, or even the dozens of descendants who carried their blood, but the simple, powerful truth that love, real love, is built one day at a time, one choice at a time, one tender touch at a time, until what began as an arrangement becomes the greatest story of all.